Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 19 team selection. I'm recording right now after the Boxing Day games. Unfortunately, as you might have heard within the cheat sheet video, I will be indisposed to make a team selection video. And we have a very short turnaround. I'm trying to get as much content to you as possible. I will try to sort of take into account potential situations with my team, given that there are 2 games to go, the Arsenal game, the Brighton game as well. And yeah, I mean, I'm in a position now where I went for Odegaard. I also went for another move, which was Trent. It didn't really work out in terms of the net points so far. We'll see what happens. But I guess the alternative would have always been playing Rodgers and maybe playing, let's say, Guardiola. So I think I'm hopefully up on the move. I would hope after Martin Odegaard plays football, hopefully, versus Ipswich, and maybe hopefully also doesn't get a red card like Bruno Fernandes. So that's my Game Week 18 review. I didn't have Bruno, which was very fortunate. I mean, things like that happen in FPL. If you guys remember my FPL team on Game Week 6, on my wild card, I had Bruno in it. And I took a -4 out of him because I thought he was suspended. And I thought I thought that red was just going to carry itself even through an appeal. And I was totally wrong about that. But it did get me Palmer, and suddenly it set me on a different course of motion. And I've had a pretty positive sort of trajectory in terms of my season since. But things like that happen from time to time in FPL all the time. If you own Bruno, if you just bought Bruno, that can happen. Right? It doesn't feel good because it's exactly like I think as I felt, right? I wildcarded into a Bruno. Suddenly you've got a player who is quite important to your team in terms of the amount of value you've put over him. You've expected more from him and he's provided you nothing. And you have to find yourself with a sort of strategy of being able to amend that sort of move or the suspension within the Newcastle at home game. And that happens from time to time. And that's just classic FPL. So I made a pretty silly tweet about it, totally in jest, of course. But I fell on a good side of positive variance just by being able to ignore that sort of outcome. And that happens in FPL. So starting with my team, I think I have Flecken yet to play, Gabriel, Odegaard, and Mbeumo, João Pedro yet to play. I'm really hoping that either João Pedro or Flecken goes crazy. I'm hoping that Mbeumo does something and Odegaard and Gabriel. Like clearly the crown of this game week, or the crown jewel really, is going to be Odegaard and João Pedro, really from an ownership perspective. But I'm not expecting too much at the same time because things can sort of fall flat on its face, and Flecken just has a series of bad games. We've known this from a long time now, and we just haven't gotten too much points on them. But at the same time, and Allison hasn't gotten that much points. Araya, hopefully, fingers crossed, isn't getting that much points anyways, and it's not like the Flecken experience has been super bad. At the same time, it's also given me the amount of money to actually upgrade the outfield positions, and if you guys give me the choice of being able to upgrade my outfield team or my goalkeepers, I'm always going to answer that I prefer upgrading my outfield team because I kind of like the ability that you can maneuver your funds a little bit easier on that basis. And I'm recording from the perspective that I've seen in Game Week 18 at least that Cunha's done well. So right now I've got 52 points on the board. Palmer got bonus, Salah got bonus, was the captain. Salah ended up being the worst captain compared to Palmer, but I think you take Leicester at home every day. People were going to say the Christmas jinx was real. Potentially it was, but Salah also hit the crossbar, so I don't think I'm going to pay any attention to that. We were close to a Trent assist as well, though. Hall got benched in the end. I think that it was a bit of luck in terms of that Duran red card, right? Like, do I see Aston Villa racking up 0.3 XG versus Newcastle? No, because even Leicester and Ipswich have racked up more XG, and that's simply because of the 10 versus 11 nature of the game. But it shows that Newcastle are definitely on a bit of an upswing, and they're performing really well. So credit to them overall, right? Newcastle at the start of the season, if you guys remember, were also suffering from a different circumstance. They were the team that was 10 versus 11. So funny how things sort of revolve around that in FPL, and things come around and go around. So that's kind of my team. The big sort of asterisk here is Cunha, right? He is still not suspended. I say this as someone who wears glasses, and I don't know. I think that everyone is on holiday right now. The next deadline is still on a holiday day. I probably won't be able to do the deadline stream because unfortunately it is my wife's birthday. So, happy early birthday to her. But it's also my birthday the day beforehand, and I'm not really sure I'll be around for content and all that sort of stuff. So Cunha, I think, is going to play. There's a high chance that I just roll my transfer, right? Seriously, I think I've got one free transfer. I have a little bit of money in the bank. There's an opportunity to move out of Flecken. There's an opportunity to move out of Cunha. And the only player that I can really move Cunha to, because I'm restricted from Jackson and I don't really want Jackson on my team, is Solanke. But Solanke does have some pretty tough fixtures, and that's kind of the big dilemma for this game week here when I'm looking at Game Week 19 as I sort of iterated on with my transfer plan. So my transfer plans, I talked about how, what would happen if I roll? What would happen if I just played Cunha? And right now, I'm leaning towards actually maybe just playing Cunha because I really don't like the forward landscape. I want a little bit more information if I can just stack a really, really poor Southampton attacker into my team and manage the team like so, because I don't know, Tall Paul had some pretty big chances versus West Ham, but is he a serious FPL pick right now? Not necessarily, without the information that I'm yet to receive from more, I guess, U-rich football. Is Adam Armstrong suddenly a decent pick because his minutes are good and he's a penalty taker? Maybe. But it's looking like we're not getting too much value from the midfield as well, because there's a couple budget players. They've all been a little bit uninspiring. So then the question, I guess, is do we all have to own a really expensive midfielders? Like, for example, the Gordons, the Mbumos, the Gordons of the world. And I still think, for example, Sars, Semenyo, Rogers, these players are really good. And when they have nice fixtures, they're good to optimize around. And I really have no regrets owning players like that. Sars probably the player that I'm going to miss the most on this game week. So is someone like Eze, but I just can't really justify going towards Eze. I just think that, yeah, he's a bit of a fragile player, and it does feel like if you go there, you are putting yourself up with the chance of dealing with the risk of Eze struggling with his fitness and getting re-injured, that sort of stuff. Whereas if you own Eze, it's a little bit easier to just say, I want to play, I'm playing Eze for Southampton at home, and it's so simple. But Mbumo is also going to have, you know, Arsenal in this game week, and then he's got to have Southampton next. So it kind of feels like, why not give more time for Sar to play, for Eze to play, to see what changes with their minutes, changes with set pieces, changes with Mateta's minutes as well. And then I can make a better educated decision on Game Week 21 is sort of how I feel about the next big swing for my team within the midfield. On top of that, that's when Bruno comes back into play, really, because Game Week 20 is a Liverpool match. So that's kind of the fixture navigation aspect of things right now. But moving on towards my Game Week 19 team, I'm going to be playing in defense, you know, yours truly, Mark Flecken. Once again, not using a free transfer on Mark Flecken, probably going to end up getting, I don't know how many points versus Brighton, probably 1 point, 2 points. He's versus Arsenal this week at home, probably another 1 point or 2 pointer. I'm just hoping that a lot of Arsenal shots are saved by him and he still concedes, but to Odegaard, hopefully, and, you know, all things are happy. In defense, I'll be playing Gabriel, Trent, and Lewis once again, and that's simply because I think Hall has a pretty tough fixture since it's an away match, and then with Castagna, I think it's close between Castagna and Lewis because there's the away aspect for Lewis, but I don't think City were absolutely awful on defense versus Everton. They gave a great chance to Jack Harrison at the end of the game in transition on the counter, and they also gave, you know, that chance to NDI as well, who honestly had a great finish. And Lewis probably was a little bit at fault for that, but the amount of crosses coming from the general direction from that sort of right-hand side where Guardiola's defending is also a little bit poor as well. And that's kind of been the nature of City. It kind of feels like you don't have defenders per se, but people playing in the defensive position, and it's a little bit different to sort of gritting it out compared to a team like Nottingham Forest, for example, who are just an absolutely great defense, right? So yeah, it's a tricky thing, but I still think I'll play Rico Lewis once again. Castagna does feel nice, but it's a home fixture versus a really top team, so no regrets on benching him too. In the midfield, moving on to that very, very swiftly, I will be playing Odegaard, Palmer, Mbumo, and Salah, and also Rogers, right? So the implication of this is that I'm playing a 3-5-2, and we'll talk about the forwards in a moment, but captaincy, I think, is the big debate, and I'll leave that for the end of the video. But this week, you've got Mbumo versus Arsenal at home. It doesn't feel so great playing an attacker versus one of your defenders, and I do have João Pedro, who is the most likely benching candidate, but Rogers for me has a great game. I think João Pedro probably has a slightly worse game anyways, if I had to compare it to, let's say, even Mbumo, and just the sort of quality of player Mbumo is versus a João Pedro, given that they're both penalty takers, given that one of them is a midfielder as well. So maybe if I'm really confident, I guess, in the Arsenal clean sheet outcome, which I'm not anyways, because I think Brentford have been a pretty respectable offense, particularly at home, that I'm just going to go with Mbumo here and sort of hope for the best, kind of do a little bit of a soft hedge here between, you know, my Gabriel, my Fleck, and my Mbumo, and hope for the best with Odegaard as well and see what happens. It's going to be a little bit of a medium game week from that perspective, because I know that the outcomes aren't going to be like flowing within all the directions for my team, but that's that. Palmer and Salah is the interesting argument, and then Odegaard is quite a simple play versus a pretty weak Brentford team from a defensive point of view. And then in the front line, I'm actually planning to still make that transfer of Cunha to Solanke. There is a chance where I still decide on going to roll, and that's specifically if, I don't know, there's, let's say, a bit of confidence in me that a Southampton defender or forward rather can sit in my team and I can suddenly move into another midfielder that's very strong. I still think that Rogers has 2 good games coming up next. Mbumo is quite a safe keep. Mbumo can also be a sell on 21, But unless I'm really confident about a Southampton forward, I think it probably still makes sense to kind of go to Solanke now, bask in the Wolves at home fixture, enjoy that, and try to hope for the best over this run of games where you kind of have up and down games, right? You've got an Arsenal game within the distance for Solanke. You also have some good home games as well. And it's going to be an up and down experience, which has been basically the entire Spurs season so far. Whereas probably I'd say the defense is right now just a pure down, whereas the attack has definitely been up and down, right? So I do think Solanke makes sense. And I'm expecting, as I said, that Cunha is going to be suspended from 20 plus. And yeah, I miss out on Game Week 19 versus Spurs, but I get a player and a pick that is going to be quite consistent and stable in the meantime, where I don't really have any reasons to spend a lot of money within my team. Like I've got Lewis, I've got Hall, I've got Castagna, and I like these picks as a third sort of party rotation. And Gabriel and Trent can just be played every single week. The weak aspect of my team is clearly that sort of Flecken aspect, but by even going for this Cunha to Solanke move, I will still have enough money in the bank to go to Flecken to Pickford in the future. And that's probably how I'm actually going to play it out, right? Maybe I wait for Konate instead. Maybe I wait for Arnie Slot, but I don't really want to triple up on Liverpool too soon. And eyeing up, I think, a loose Pickford transfer around Game Week 24, that sort of time, makes sense to me. I might even go Valdemarson to Pickford if I can afford it, depending on the transfers I make for the double. Because if, let's say, the double falls on 24 or 25, and I have four or five free transfers, as I suggested that I could roll with in the transfer plan video, then it's actually something that could happen where I go for two goalkeepers and then I suddenly find a natural bench boost post this sort of double game week experience. And that could be a good way to get rid of the bench boost chip. And maybe also if I save the AM chip, then use the AM chip maybe at the end of the season, where, for example, you're using it on the big double, for example, in Game Week 36, that sort of thing. So it really depends on that, because I do think the AM chip is stronger than the bench boost, but it's also about whether, let's say, the AM chip used on 24, 25, or let's say AM on 31 or the AM on 36 is super different in terms of the expectations, right? And we'll get a better understanding of that as we see the league table progress and teams sort of progress within the cup matches respectively. So that's going to be my team selection. I am planning on going for Dominic Solanke, but the alternative, as you guys know, is to go for just a roll here to play Mateus Cunha anyways. You've got Spurs, you're targeting Dragusin less defense, which I don't know. Liverpool targeted Dragusin, or they mentioned that they did, and now there's no Dragusin to target. Maybe the defense is better. I'm kidding, obviously, but there does make some sense to go just playing Cunha. I do think that they've totally outperformed expectations, and him specifically as a player. That corner goal aside, he's just had way too many goals this season from few too many XG, and that happens, right? People can go in hot patches. It's nice to own a player within a hot patch. He's the highest point scoring forward within the game somehow, and I still somehow think he's not someone that I evaluate as a top 3 forward within the game. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be crazy, but that kind of shows you, I think, the fall off of Haaland more recently, and then I guess how slow it's taken or how long it's taken for Isak to kind of get back up there as well in terms of performances. But I've got these players on my team. Happy to keep João Pedro as well. João Pedro will be put on the bench, so I'll be playing a 3-5-2 no matter what, because I just think that he is the odd one out when I look at my team. I prefer an Mbumo towards him next game week, even though it is that sort of mirror matchup anyways. And that's it for my team in FPL. In terms of my bench, I'll be playing Castagna and then Hall at the back of my bench. But captaincy, that's the sort of final piece of this video. The expected kind of goals and assists is pretty close here overall for this week here, because Palmer clearly has a slightly better fixture. Salah has a great game because West Ham have still looked like a team that have given away so many chances. And you know what? The added benefit is that Kilman is injured. Arguably the out of form Areola is back in the fray. And so Liverpool, of course, are expected to have slightly more expected goals than Chelsea, just by a hair. But as we always know, it's then at that point a comparison as well of the baselines of these individual players. So this week is once again a little bit more tilted towards Palmer in terms of expected assists, a little bit more tilted towards Salah in expected goals, but that's very normal for Salah because he's just more expected goal dominant than Palmer. The expected points that I'm looking from a lot of models are very similar. And I think that this is one of those game weeks where, because the captaincy is so close from a data perspective, you're kind of looking at this and just saying, what is my risk preference, right? Do I prefer going against a 170, 180% owned Salah captaincy, or do I feel like I want to go for Palmer once again, who, maybe I've captained against Salah a couple times and it hasn't worked out so well for the most part, and Salah has just ultimately been more consistent. So that I think is really just something that comes down to risk preference. My preference, given that I guess I'm at a nice rank now, and I'd maybe like to sort of stay around here without having to feel the brutal consequences of what some people have been feeling recently with, you know, let's say the Haaland captaincy and the swings there, is just to go for a Salah captaincy here and hope that the rest of my team sort of provides the value for me to be able to get hopefully another rank rise this game week, just because the team in of itself is quite strong. And that's pretty much the video for the team selection. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. As I said, there's still a possibility that I'd like to roll. If you guys think strongly that I should roll anyways and play Cunha versus Tottenham and give my team a little bit more optionality, please do let me know. That would be quite interesting to kind of see what you guys think. But otherwise, I hope you guys have a wonderful game week, and take care.